to the second day of the webinar series commemorating the 2-year-long 150th anniversary of the father of the nation, Gandhiji. I know the path. It is straight and narrow. It is like the edge of a sword. I rejoice to walk on it. I weep when I slip. God's word is, he who strives never perishes. I have implicit faith in that promise. Though, therefore, from my weakness, I fail 1,000 times. I will not lose faith, but I hope that I shall see the light when the flesh has been brought under the perfect subjection, as someday it must. From Truth is God by Gandhiji. We can agree that we are living in a world which is divided increasingly day by day by global unrest, fear, anger, hatred, discontent, despair, immortality, and so much more. And the number of intensity of ethnic and religious conflicts seem to grow, gaining higher and higher intensity all around the world. In this milieu, Gandhi's political and social philosophy in general and his approach of the concepts of truth, non-violence, and Satyagraha in particular could be the starting point of the regeneration or rebirth of non-violent or less violent cultures and societies. The whole non-violent philosophy of the Mahatma, based on the two core concepts of the Gandhian heritage, is not a new proposition. Gandhi himself says that I have nothing new to teach the world. Truth and non-violence are as old as the heat. All I have done is to try experiments in both on as vast scale as I could. In other words, we can say that the Mahatma just tried to revive and to make much more understandable those old teachings for the whole world to make them usable in the new social and political context. As John de Bondura had quoted, the problem of human conflict is perhaps the most fundamental problem of all time. And to this, I quote as a solution Gandhiji, my life is my message. And this entails an even firmer belief in what Martin Luther King Jr. had opined. If humanity is to progress, Gandhi is inescapable. He lived, thought, and acted inspired by the vision of humanity evolving toward a world of peace and harmony. We may ignore him at our own risk. Let us then celebrate the Mahatma in the best way possible, that is, by enunciating his life principles. To elucidate more on his teachings, the Assam Royal Global University has organized a 3-day webinar series. RGU is a leading university of the Northeast, which has also been ranked the #1 private university of Assam by Education World. It is committed to providing unparalleled education to render holistic development of the student. One of the strongest pillars of RGU is its highly qualified and well-experienced intellectual capital of 250 plus faculty who serve as the motivation catalyst for 5,000 plus students. Learning in RGU goes beyond the classrooms and textbooks. RGU stands for academic excellence in a holistic way. Today, the second day of the webinar series is themed Relevance of Gandhiji's Political, Social and Economic Thoughts in Today's World. We have amongst us Professor Krishna Barua, Senior Professor, Department of English, Royal Global University, who will deliver the introductory remarks and her thoughts on the theme. With almost 4 decades of academic experience, Madam was the former professor in English, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Guwahati. She has more than 60 publications in journals of repute and 2 books to her credit. Madam, may I request kindly share your thoughts with us?
Respected Vice Chancellor, Professor S.P. Singh, Professor Manisha Barua, Professor Archana Barua, my dear colleagues, and my dear students, a very good morning to all of you. It is an honor and a privilege to be here celebrating the 158th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. The relevance of Gandhi, if we think, especially of the modern youth, yes, is very, very important. We have in our course, especially in the humanities stream, as well as in English, text in the essay, like Hind Swaras, and in autobiography too, we study Gandhi, My Experiments with Truth. And the take by the students always is very positive. They understand the essentials of Gandhiji and the experiments of truth, which we teach in the autobiography, in life narrative paper. They try to understand the transformative way that they take it as an illustrations of their own life, and which I always tell them that you just look into the phases of your life and try to see how functional you can make it, experiments with daily activities of life. And one question I always ask my students is that how many times have you encountered truth? And it takes at least 10 minutes for them to answer. They have to find out how many times you have to encounter truth. And this is what Gandhi had said. Absolute truth is not possible. It is absolutely impossible. You have to find the relative truths in everyday life, small little truths, and only from the small little truths will the great absolute truth will come out. And I want to mention here what V.S. Naipaul had said. He was a great India beta, but in his novel, The Magic Seeds, he had made one of his protagonists who is a dysfunctional protagonist, and he mentions in the early part of the novel that Gandhi in London in 1890 was floating on an ocean of not seeing and not knowing, and how the book itself, especially that not seeing and not knowing, and the way that he came to experiment with different ways of life, that led to understanding of the many activities which were weaknesses, which he turned into strengths, like his weakness in public speaking. Ultimately, that made him to curb down sentences, short sentences, and which ultimately made him a very good drafter. So this was something that he had made his weakness into a strength. And B.S. Naipaul makes his character, say about My Experiments with Truth. It is a remarkable book, very simple, very fast, very honest. This is what a great writer has talked about through his character, about the book Experiments with Truth, that it is so fast, but it is very simple and very honest, the essentials of life. A book without boasting, a book so true that every young Indian sees himself in its pages. There's no other book like it in India. It would be a modern Indian epic if people read it. They feel they don't need to. They feel they know it all. It's the Indian way. So this is what he makes his character speak right through the character. He talks about My Experiments with Truth, that it is a modern classic, modern epic, but people don't read it because people ignore it and they just refer to it as a book without reading it. And this is what I tell my students always, that all the time you have to know the transformative way that the three phases, the four phases of life, every experiment, every occasion that you have in life is an experiment with truth. In Experiments with Truth, I will just make it very short. Gandhi had, in the first part, he had insisted on that Sanskrit learning should be a must. Okay, knowing the legacy of your land. Not only that, this was actually dinned into him by a very eminent lawyer, a conservative in London, by Pincott, And he said, when he went to meet him, and Gandhi wanted to get some help from him, from the legal profession, he said, first you have to know India. You have no knowledge of the world. A vakil should have knowledge of human nature. He should be able to read a man's character from his face. And he should have a knowledge of Indian history. And this is what I tell you, students. Please know yourself. To know yourself, you have to know Indian history, as Gandhi had mentioned, which was advised to him by Mr. Pinkett. And at the same time, you also have to know about human nature. You should be able to read a man's character from his face. And how do you know human nature? By being one with the people. When we read Gandhi, we see that he was influenced by Emerson, the transcendentalist of American philosophers, then Ruskin, Tolstoy, right? And we see that the idea of self-reliance which he had brought about, the idea of freedom which he talked about, absolutely about self-abnegation which he brought about, was a mixture of the way that European state of history of ideas talks about, as well as of the legacy of the past of the Indian tradition, the Gita and all the texts that he had influenced. And this is a very beautiful quote which I always tell my students, which he had given in Young India. I do not want my house to be walled in all sides and my windows to be stuffed. I want the culture of all lands to be known about to be blown about my house as freely as possible. The culture of all lands, my windows have to be open. The culture of all lands should be blow about as freely as possible. But I refuse to be blown off my feet. So this is the important thing. You have to have your eyes open, your mind open. The freedom which he talks about, the freedom of the mind, knowledge is freedom. And you have to have your doors and windows open, but you should not be imitators, but you should be one who is taking it up in the historical sense, which T.S. Eliot had said, that you are observant of what is going on, and then you give your contribution to society. Another aspect in Gandhi, which was very important when you see it, that suffering is essential for progress. A nation which does not suffer, he says, made that great statement, does not progress. Suffering, cheerfully endured, ceases to be suffering and is transmuted into positive energy. Therefore, when we read the experiments with truth, what do we find? We talk about relative truth. We talk about experiments with everyday life. We talk about the objectivity of truth, where truth is variable in different circumstances. There is no dogmatism. There is no static dividing line, and you say that truth is this and untruth is this. And the main thing is the fearlessness which he had brought about. When you are fearless, then about your own, because you have no needs, you don't have any fear, only then you have freedom of the mind. And as I tell my students every time, he talks about slavery, against slavery of any kind, even if it is a slavery of an idea, it should not indoctrinate you. You shouldn't be conditioned with it. So it is a slavery of anything. He gives an example in my experiments with truth. When he is slave to the dhobi, he cannot wash his clothes. Why should I be slave to the dhobi? So he washes his own clothes. He irons the collar, all right? Because he shouldn't be a slave to the deeds. He should be the master of it. Please keep in mind, students, this was one of the main things which he had talked about. Whether it is slavery of religion, whether it is slavery of ideas, whether it is slavery of attitude or everyday life, you should not be prone to that. You should be the master of your deeds. And Gandhi's vision will end with the idea of the social organization, which he had called the oceanic circle. Beautiful metaphor he had given about the oceanic circle against the pyramid structure, where you go into a horizontal space, and the individual is the unit of the center, and therefore it is a complete decentralized way of social organization, where it comes from the individual as the pivotal unit, and the outside force, the external force cannot decentralize, cannot crush the inner individual. So village panchayats, etc. And this was a great contribution to philosophy as well as to politics and social movements after time. This is what, enjoy your Gandhi. Please make it a part of your life, students. Okay, don't think that he was of the Middle Ages when he talked about village industries or anything. He was the most modern of all. As I mentioned here, his experiments with truth is regarded as a modern epic. Each one of you should have the book with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. My experiments with truth can absolutely be read as a modern epic. It can definitely make us realize how every bend in the life river that we sail through could be turned into an experiment with truth. I hope the younger generation, and in fact all of us, realize its full potential and full worth. And also, I truly agree with you, and I often tell the students in class to gather knowledge, for knowledge is power, and it is indeed freedom. So thank you so much, ma'am, for those words, enlightening words. We are delighted to be joined by our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. S.B. Singh. Professor Singh has been associated with the Royal Group from its inception in 2009 as the founder director of the institution. He further moved to Amity Education Group in 2013 and joined as the Senior Vice President Academic of the group and was responsible for functioning of 6 Amity campuses situated in different parts of the country and abroad. He also served as the founder Vice Chancellor of Amity University, Chhattisgarh for almost 2 years before joining the Assam Royal Global University in November 2016 as the founder Vice Chancellor. With the vision and hard work of Professor Singh, the university has been ranked the #1 private university of Assam by Education World within just a span of 3 years. With more than 3 decades of rich experience in teaching, research, academic administration in institutions of repute across the nation, Royal Group is indeed blessed twice to have been associated with Professor Singh in his journey so far. While serving his second tenure as Vice Chancellor of Royal Global University, Professor Singh has completed almost 20 years of headship of well-known academic institutions of the country. He is also a well-known geologist. He has done his MBA and he is also a law graduate with PhD in strategic management. So, thank you so much for joining us, and may I request you to kindly enlighten us with your words.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pranami. Really, I'm humbled. It was such a long, elaborated introduction of mine. Let me first congratulate Department of English, Royal School of English, for organizing such a wonderful webinar today, and my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Manisha for taking our time today, Professor Barua. So kind of you. I think we are really going to listen so many new things, good things about Gandhian philosophy, about political, economical, and social concepts. I personally, Professor P.J. Mahanta sir, Dr. Krishna Barua, and Dr. Archana Barua, and other teachers of Royal Global University, of Guwahati University, everyone, good morning to all of you. Gandhiji is very close to my heart. Not because I've seen 2 movies called Munna Bhai MBBS, but otherwise also. And I tell you very frankly, when we were preparing for civil services examination, and every time I attempted my mains examination, there was a full-fledged topic or subject called Gandhi, Nehru, and Tagore. And many times question used to come between Gandhi, Nehru, and Tagore, their way of thinking, their economic thoughts, their thoughts, basically thought of Gandhi, Nehru, Tagore. And we continued that, and we studied in a very systematic manner. I think what all is required to be read about them, I have read it. But then that was long back, around 30 years back. Now, last few days, from 21st of September, that United Nations have the Day of Peace, until 2nd of October, for non-violence. There's two things in between. I'm having webinars by United Peace Federation every day. And I'm discussing and we're talking about Gandhiji and their non-violence from quite some time. As far as my little knowledge is concerned, I'm not a author or maybe thinker about Gandhi's thought. But for me, I will just touch upon only one thought that is very close to my heart. That is with respect to his concept of using very little for yourself. And that is where I think all his economical thought, all Gram Swaraj to political thought, or maybe social thought is embedded in. That may be Gram Swaraj, that may be nature has enough to provide for everyone's need, for not for everyone's greed. You talk about a rural economy, you talk about political integrity, you talk about truth, you talk about non-violence. If you can live with bare minimum, I'm not saying in today's time you cannot live like Gandhiji. I'm also wearing a coat and talking about Gandhiji. So that may be misnomer, but that is not. But if I'm wearing this coat to the extent possible without changing for the fashion, for my requirement and need, maybe at a very low cost, and using it for almost 3 to 4 years, and having only limited number of clothing in my cupboard, I think I have a Gandhian philosophy in today's time, in 21st century. What probably I wanted to reiterate here today, that if your needs are less, and if your needs are genuine, and if your needs are really relevant, though as a professor of marketing, I don't believe in consumerism. I believe in the philosophy where whatever is required, if you utilize it and use it judiciously, that is going to bring in a lot of Gandhi in you. And that thought I would reiterate here with whatever social, political, and economic thoughts we are going to discuss. That is one side. My request to all the participants and everyone, you live 100%, 90% for others, and 10% for yourself. As a teacher, we already are devoting 80%, 70% of our life to the society, to the students, to the community. But another 10%, what we probably can do more is by using less. That will keep environment intact. That will not be having a lot of impact on Mother Earth. That will also have a lot of less impact on our day-to-day life, and that will keep us always contented, calm, and we will not be much worried end of the day from where the money will come. During this pandemic time, especially I would say that people who have saved a lot of money by spending less and keeping for future, they are quite happy, they are stress-free. But people who are having very little money and whatever they have spent, they don't have anything in their hands, they are having lots and lots of problem in current time. So if everybody thinks like philosophy of Gandhiji, to use little and use less for yourself and distribute whatever laurels you have to others around you and to the society at large, I think that is what that thought I really wanted to speak about. And I think I have not taken much time, 5 minutes I slotted to me. So I concluded in that time. My best wishes to, and sorry, Dr. Manisha, we kept you waiting for so long. Over to you, Pranami. Thank you. All the best to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Using little and generating more, I believe in today's world, which is shrinking in its resource capital of all sorts, this mantra of Gandhi's life could be the key to the lock. So you have indeed, in a very few words, hammered on a very pertinent philosophy of life. Thank you again for illuminating this talk with your presence and your thoughts. Thank you so much, sir. Coming to the highlight of today's webinar, we now have the address by today's guest speaker, Professor Manisha Barua, noted Gandhian scholar, Department of Philosophy, Guwahati University. Professor Barua has a PhD on the topic, Impact of Religion on Gandhiji's Political, Economic, and Social Thoughts. And with this, Professor Barua has emerged as a noted Gandhian philosopher from the region over the decades.
Sir, मैं बोल रहा था actually. हाँ, बताइए.
He joined the Department of Philosophy, Guwahati University as a lecturer in 1987 and is currently serving as a professor in the same department. She has published a book titled Religion in Gandhi and several research papers in national and international journals. She has presented papers in several regional, national,
Right.
and international conferences. She has
Right.
also presented a paper on Gandhi and comparative religion in the World Philosophical Congress held in Boston in 1998. She has served as a member of the Academic Council, Guwahati University, and Sir Bhaskar Verma University, Nalbari. She is a member of the Executive Council, Guwahati University Court. Madam has also served as a member of the selection committee of various universities like Nehru, Manipur University, North Bengal University, Vishwabharati, Shantiniketan, and others. 9 scholars have obtained PhD under her supervision and 5 have obtained MPhil. Madam, may I now request you to kindly deliver your speech and enlighten us? We are all ears.
Thank you, Pranami. Respected Vice Chancellor, Sir, S.P. Singh, respected Krishna Barua ma'am, respected Archana Barua, who is a friend of mine, colleagues from the Royal Global University, and dear students. And honored to be a part of. I am thankful to the organizers for to speak a few words on Gandhi in the Gandhi Jayanti lectures. Well, Mahatma Gandhi is the most well-known name of this century and the last century. Said that it is hard to believe that such a man ever walked this earth in flesh and blood. Now, my topic is the relevance of Gandhi. So this word relevance can be used in a variety of senses. Relevance is something which is applicable to the society. And when we apply something to the society, we call it is relevant. And it is applicable to the society and it is important for the society. Also discussed from various standpoints. For example, a particular doctrine may be relevant at a particular period of time, under particular circumstances, and it may not be relevant in a different period of time. But Gandhi's philosophy, we must say, is relevant at all times under different circumstances. Of course, to it I would add a phrase with some amount of modification. Gandhi may not be relevant as it is 100%, but with some amount of modification, Mahatma Gandhi is the most relevant personality, not only of the last century, but also of this century. And I believe he will be relevant in the days to come, in the future also. Now, there is a sloka in the Bhagavad Gita which says, Yada Yadagi Dharmasya Glani Bhavati Bharata Abhyuthanam Adharmasya Tadatmanam Srijamyaham, which means that when unrighteousness comes to this world and righteousness declines on from age to age. I am not here to call Mahatma Gandhi an incarnation like Rama, Krishna, Buddha, and so on. But definitely, he is a person who has come to this world, who was born in India, and who has worked for India at the most crucial period of our history. So Gandhi came at a time to save India from all sorts of crisis. There was a crisis in this world, social, economic, religious, and so on. And Gandhi came at this time to save India. So by discussing Mahatma Gandhi, we cannot ignore the part played by religion. And it is religion which has influenced all his thoughts and activities. So Gandhi has quoted one very important poem in his newspaper, Young India, It is a poem by George Herbert which is cited. Teach me, my God and King, all things thee to see, and what I do in anything, to do it as for thee. A servant with this clause makes drudgery divine. If a look for thy clause makes this and action fine. So this is a poem, and Gandhi was very much impressed by this poem because he also dedicated his entire life for the cause of the society, and he always remembered ritual.
Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am. Manisha, ma'am.
Which can be practiced in this world and in every act of mine, in what I do, even ordinary things in what I do, I can be religious. So this is a very secular, I feel it is a very secular view of religion. Gandhi was born as a Hindu, no doubt, but he had all the ideals of Hinduism. But as Krishna Barua ma'am has said, he was not swayed by emotion, and he always applied reason to judge whether a particular doctrine, whether a particular ritual, or whether a particular idea is relevant or can be accepted. So rituals, dogmas, our rites, etc., according to Gandhi, should not be accepted as it is because my religion says so. But it should be thoroughly true. We must apply reason. Reason is the acid by which I can purify my religious ideas. So Gandhi had a very secular view of religion. He read the scriptures of all the religions, almost all, I don't say all, but almost all the religions of the world. For example, he read the Quran, he read the Bible. He was very impressed by the Bible. He read the Bhagavad Gita, and he calls the Bhagavad Gita his mother. Because just as a child finds consolation in the bosom of the mother, similarly, Gandhi said that I feel consoled by reading the Bhagavad Gita. So Gandhi calls the Bhagavad Gita his mother. He read other scriptures, the Jaina scriptures, and so the Buddha philosophy, and so on and so forth. And he said that all religions have truth in them, and they are all partial and relative truth. It is not the absolute truth. Gandhi was an Anekantavadi. Anekantavada means aneka. Aneka means many. Anta means truth. That is the theory which accepts the many-sidedness of truth. So, like an Anekantavadin of Jaina philosophy, Gandhi accepted the truth from all the different religions of the world, and he said that they are relative truths, and no religion of the world can embody an absolute truth. They are all partial truths, but the absolute truth can be found out by reading the partial truth, so which is nothing to Gandhi but truth. So, truth is the basis of Gandhian philosophy. Truth is not it is not a quality of judgment. Some judgments are true, some are false. That is not what he means by truth. To Gandhi, truth is existence. It is the very reality. It is reality with a capital R. Now the question is, why did Gandhi give so much importance to truth? Gandhi went to the extent of converting the sentence, saying that truth is a substitute. So the word truth is a better substitute for God. Now, what is the reason for saying so? Gandhi said that God may not be accepted by everybody. The atheist does not believe in it. And God, Jaina and the Buddha religions do not believe in God. But truth is something which is accepted by everybody. There is no person on earth who can deny truth. So, Gandhi found that truth is a better substitute than the word for the word God. Now, again, Gandhi said that ahimsa or non-violence is the other name of truth. They are like the two sides of the same coin. Mahatma Gandhi said that truth and non-violence, that is Satya and Ahimsa, they are the two sides of the same metallic coin. I'm quoting Gandhi. Who can say which is the obverse and which is the reverse? So both are, truth and non-violence are intertwined with each other, and we cannot achieve truth, according to Gandhi, without non-violence. Now, what is non-violence? Ordinarily, by non-violence, we mean non-injury, non-killing, and so on and so forth. But Gandhi had a different meaning for non-violence. According to Gandhi, we must be non-violent in thought, word, and deed. So it is not enough for us not to inflict any physical injury to any living being, but our mind should be non-violent. We should not think of any bad, or we should not have any ill feeling towards anybody. So this is the broader connotation of the word non-violence or ahimsa. Now, with these two principles of Satya and Ahimsa, truth and non-violence, Gandhi tried to mold all his activities. Coming to the political field, the political activities of Gandhi, Gandhi was different from the thinkers of those days. Most of the thinkers of those days, like Swami Vivekananda and others, they thought that politics is a dirty affair. Politics is a dirty affair, and therefore we should not indulge in politics. But according to Gandhi, politics can be as sacred as any other religious activity. So politics is important to Gandhi, and we must not keep ourselves away from politics. So Gandhi he did join politics. Gandhi was compared to Jesus in the famous book, Mahatma Gandhi 100 Years. Gandhi was compared to different religious persons, Jesus, like Muhammad, Ashoka, and so forth, and Buddha, and he mentions that Gandhi excels all of them. Ashoka and Buddha were born kings, but they kept themselves away from politics. Ashoka took part in politics, he was a king, but when he saw the devastation of the Kalinga war, he also gave up politics. But Jesus also did not join politics. But Gandhi waded into politics, he jumped into the political field. And he wanted to purify politics. He waded through the mud of politics, and came out of that politics by being personally uncontaminated by the mud. Moreover, Gandhi said that people who say that politics is a dirty affair and religion has nothing to do with politics, he said that this is accept, because somebody has to enter politics, and we must try our best to purify this politics. So how can we purify politics? By applying the principles of religion, that is basically truth and non-violence, satya and ahimsa. We have a democratic form of government, that is the government for the people, of the people, by the people, and so on and so forth. But democracy today is a misnomer. I mean, it is no longer truly democratic. We have seen how elections are full of corruption. We have might is right, so whoever has might, he wins everything. And we have seen that there is always interference from the center, interference from the state in the lives of the people. Nobody has freedom. Freedom is only in name. So Gandhi was very much for freedom, individual freedom. But do we have real freedom today? No, people are oppressed by the politicians, oppressed by the state officials, by the dignitaries, and so on and so forth. The ordinary man in the street has no say in anything with regard to politics. He cannot speak out his mind. So this is not real democracy. So real democracy today, I feel, can be achieved by following the Gandhian maxim, the Gandhian principle. Because Gandhi said that government is the best which governs the least. So Gandhi's view on politics to some person was utopian, no doubt. It was utopian. It was idealistic, because he said that there should be minimum interference of the state, and it is best to have a government where there is least interference. And Gandhi did not want a police force to say so. He did not want a military force, because he believed that if people are well behaved, if people are disciplined, they can rule themselves. So this is of course an utopian ideal, but it has a lot of strength, a lot of moral in it. Because if people themselves are moral, if they are true, if they follow the principles of truth, then they can be their own governor. They can govern themselves without state interference, without police interference, without military interference. So this was the concept of democracy in Gandhi's mind, 100% democracy. But today democracy is only in name. And Gandhi, in this political aspect, believed in satyagraha, he believed in Swaraj, and so many other principles. Satyagraha is non-cooperation, because it is non-cooperation not by violent means, but by non-violent means. So if the government is unjust, if it does not respect the wishes of the people, then the people have every right to rise against the government by lawful means, by means of non-violence. That is non-cooperation with the government, civil disobedience, non-government and non-payment of taxes which are unjustifiable, and so on and so forth. So Gandhi's method of satyagraha, it comes from two words taken together, satya and agraha. Satya is true, and agraha is force. So satyagraha is truth force. So something that can be achieved by truth. And this principle of Satyagraha was, I should say, not introduced. It was introduced by Gandhi and was made popular by Gandhi. And after that, many other countries like South Africa and different countries of the world tried to follow the Gandhian principle of Satyagraha. Now, what is Swaraj? Swaraj is self-rule. Self-rule, Swa means self, Raj means rule. So it is the rule of the self. Gandhi was basically a religious man, so he believed in the concept of soul or self. So it is something, by Swaraj, it means freedom. We mean freedom, but freedom, why freedom? Because it is ruled by the self. And this freedom or Swaraj is the right of every, as Bal Gangadhar Tilak said, Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. So every person, every man is born free and he has the right to rule himself. When he himself, if every man rules himself, individual Swaraj, then there is total Swaraj. That is, it becomes totalitarian. So Swaraj, according to Gandhi, the individual Swaraj is the Swaraj of the people is the sum total of the Swaraj of the individual. So individual Swaraj taken together is true Swaraj. That is Swaraj or total Swaraj. So everything taken together forms real Swaraj. The Swaraj is also mentioned in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Prana Anandam, Shakti Samriddham, Rajam, which gives us Shanti or peace, which gives us fulfillment, gives us freedom, and so on and so forth. This is mentioned by the Taittiriya and by the ancient scripture of Swaraj. Now, there are different ways how Swaraj can be applied to all spheres of life. Political Swaraj is a must, and Gandhi is known for bringing about the independence of India. No man should be under foreign rule, under the subjugation of foreign powers. That is political Swaraj. Individual Swaraj is freedom to act as I want. But I must act, be reminded, act as I want, behave as I want, does not mean that I can be unruly, like a horse without rein. No, that is not true Swaraj. True Swaraj will happen only if I rule myself with by being under the influence of the religious principles, the moral principles, and so on and so forth. So that is Swaraj of the individual. And economic Swaraj means that every man has a right to earn his livelihood. He has a right to earn his living, and so on and so forth. Coming to the economic sphere, Gandhi idea in the economic sphere, Gandhi said, I am neither a politician, economist, nor a scientist, nor a social reformer, but I have my views in all these different aspects of life. So economics was something which was not known in theory to Gandhi, but he gave us excellent economic principles. For example, the principle of minimization of human wants. We know that human wants are unlimited, but the means to satisfy these wants are limited. This is the very first sentence that we are taught in economics. I have been a student of economics, and this was the very first sentence that we were taught. So naturally, human wants are unlimited. but we must keep a check to our wants. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad said that our mind is like a restless bird. It is like a restless bird. It gets the more it wants. So there is no end to it. There is no end to the fulfillment of material wants. But we must keep our wants limited. So this is the basis of Gandhi's concept of economics. Unless and until we put a check on our wants, we cannot achieve our goals. There is unemployment. There are so many problems faced by us in the present time. And in the field of economics, Gandhi is most relevant today. People may say that in the era of globalization, in the era of industrialization or mechanization, how does Gandhi fit in today's world? He is not at all relevant today in today's economic field. But no, we have to see the roots. We have to go to the roots and find out the basic principles which can be applied even today. For example, Gandhi said that mechanization and industrialization, they are not bad in themselves, but it is only the overemphasis on industrialization, the overemphasis on mechanization that has ruined our lives. We human beings, according to Gandhi, have become machines themselves. They have become machines and they run like machines. And as a result of which, we have lost the pleasures, the simple pleasures of life. The simple pleasures of life have been wiped out by the process of mechanization. Gandhi allowed certain machines necessary for the society, and there are certain machines without which we cannot live in the present society. So Gandhi was for those machines. But over mechanization or over industrialization ruins the society, according to Gandhi. Gandhi spoke about decentralization. He gave a lot of importance on decentralization. Now, economic decentralization means that our means should not only be confined to the cities, but they should be taken to the villages. In India, at that period of time, of course, I don't know the present statistics. Yes, more than 70%, I can say safely, that more than 70% of the Indian population, they live in the villages. If everybody from the villages, they come to the cities in search of white-collar jobs, then our problems in the economic field cannot be solved. It can never be solved. So, in the present time, our leaders, the economic experts, they are speaking of going back to the villages. Gandhi gave emphasis on cottage industries, handicraft, small-scale industries, and these things are very relevant today. They are very relevant because they are labor-intensive, and not only labor-intensive, but it takes the minimum amount of cost to set up a small-scale industry or a handicraft industry and so on and so forth. So with the minimum amount of with the minimum amount of money or capital, and with a large amount of labor, we can start a small farm. So the problem of unemployment, which is one of the biggest problems, not only in India, but throughout the world, can be solved by applying the Gandhian technique of decentralization.
Ủa thiệt đó.
in the villages in our country, we can export them, and that we can have a global friendship, a global unity, and so on and so forth. Now, Swadeshi is another very important of Gandhi's economic policy. Swadeshi means using something that is produced in our country, that is locally. Exports and imports will be there, no doubt, but as far as practicable, I repeat, as far as practicable, we must try to use the goods and the items that are produced in our country, in our state, as far as practicable. So that will help us in promoting our industries, solve the problem of unemployment, and save the dignity of our countrymen. So, and the last important concept I would like to mention is the concept of trusteeship. Now, what is trusteeship? A person with abundance of wealth is allowed to earn more wealth if he can. But according to Gandhi, he must remember that he is only the trustee. He is only the trustee of the extra amount of wealth that does not belong to him. He can keep for himself as much as wealth as he needs for the minimum comfort of life. And what does a human being need? How much does a human being need? According to Gandhi, he should have a balanced diet, enough khadi to cover himself. Khadi, he refers to cloth. Enough clothes to cover himself, a decent house to live in, provision for education of his children, and so on and so forth. So these are the minimum requirements, medical requirements, and so on. So after meeting all those minimum requirements, what we can do, we can by ourselves, without any external force or compulsion, we can give the extra amount of wealth for the welfare of the society. In other words, I am only a trustee of my extra wealth. It is true that people may say that this concept of trusteeship is most irrelevant in the present time, because people are so dishonest. How can we ever accept that people will give the extra amount of wealth when people are so dishonest? Will they ever give up their extra wealth, or will they ever disclose their extra wealth and give it for the society? We may say that this concept of trusteeship is an ideal, but at least it is an ideal which we must make an effort to practice. We must try to practice as far as practicable, because there are honest people in the society still, and those honest people can give away their extra wealth instead of holding the extra wealth for them, instead of keeping it for themselves. They can use it for the welfare of the society. So this is the concept of trusteeship to which Gandhi gave so much importance. So coming to the social field, at the time when Gandhi was born, at the time when he lived, there were so many evils, so many social evils, and Gandhi tried his best to eradicate most of the evils of the society. For example, the dowry system. He worked for the emancipation of women, which is a much talked about topic of today, women's emancipation. And he urged the women of the country to not to leave their home and heart, but side by side to work to bring about India's independence that is to take part in the national. Many Indian women, we all know, they gave up their ornaments, what they were wearing, for the cause of the society, for the cause of the war of independence or national struggle. And women took an active part in this war of independence. He worked for prohibition, and he worked for the people who used to slaughter cows. He not only cared for human beings, but he also cared for the animal world. So this is a very important aspect, which is important even today, because environment, which we talk about so much, and environmental pollution, environmental upgradation, and so on and so forth. This was not something new. This is not something new which was brought about, which was talked by Gandhi, but it is as old as the Rig Vedas. There is the Shanti mantra, there is the where it says, Do Shanti, Antariksham Shanti, Prithvi Shanti. So the Shanti mantra talks about the welfare of the insects, the welfare of the plants, and the welfare of the entire natural world. So that is prevalent in our society from the very beginning, but we have forgotten, and we have slaughtered this. We have cut down the trees, slaughtered the animals. So many lives, natural things have been lost, and we are suffering from all sorts of atmospheric pollution and so on and so forth. This is the burning problem of today. And Gandhi gave very much importance to this environmental side also. And so he must be said to be very much relevant in that aspect, for at least making us aware of the factor. Now, there is so much disunity in the present society from the standpoint of religion. Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christians, and so on. People are not willing to accept each other's religion. And Gandhi gave up his life for the cause of Hindu-Muslim unity and the religious unity and so on and so forth. Religions, according to Gandhi, are like the different branches of the same tree. They are like different branches of the same tree, and they are like the waves of one single ocean. The waves are different, but the ocean is one. It is the same. The branches and leaves of the trees are different, but it comes from the same tree. The tree is one. Similarly, religion with a capital R is one. It embodies, or it has in itself, all the best things of the society: love, compassion, kindness, truth. These are the essential features of all the religions of the world. While speaking about conversion, there is a beautiful quotation by Swami Vivekananda. He said, do I want that a Hindu should become a Muslim, or a Muslim should become a Hindu, or a Christian should become a Buddhist, or a Buddhist should become a Christian? He said, God forbid. I do not want that. But what is necessary is that each must assimilate the best features of one's own religion. We must try to appreciate the best features of the individual religion and let the religions grow according to their law of growth. So this is what is necessary, even according to Gandhi. Gandhi said, we need not try to convert people from one religion to other. That time there were some missionary activities of the Christians who used to convert people. Referring to that factor, he said, a rose, the flower rose, The fragrance of the rose is its own sermon. One need not speak about the beauty of the rose. Its beauty and fragrance is its own sermon. So the religions have their own beauty. All religions, individual religions have their own beauty. They have their own fragrance. And we need not speak about them, or we need not try to other people to my religion. But the people may remain with their, or must remain with their own religion and speak of universal brotherhood, equality, fraternity. No, the Constitution of India has spoken about unity of religions, equality of all religions. So we must bring about liberty, fraternity, equality, and so on and so forth. The fundamental principles, the fundamental rights, and the directive principles of state policy, which are embodied in the Constitution of India, seek to bring about justice, social, political, economic, liberty of all individuals, and fraternity. So these are the ideals which Mahatma Gandhi always stood for. And these are the ideals which we have in the Constitution of India. The only thing is that the people must be aware. Not only aware, the people must make effort to translate these ideals into practice. The relevance of Gandhi's ideals, his philosophy, his ideas, depends on the moral transformation of the people. If the best form which governs the least, then we must be able to rule ourselves. We must be fit enough to rule ourselves. Otherwise, police will be needed, police will be necessary. If we have to apply the principle of trusteeship as advocated by Gandhi, every man must be honest. He must declare the income or the amount of wealth that he has. If equality is to be established in the society, then untouchability has to go. Differences between the people have to. I cannot divide the society into the higher class or the lower class. We must all have faith in the principle that all men are brothers. How far a country has progressed, it will progress, according to Gandhi, will depend on the people. It will depend on the individual, on the moral of the individual. We must be morally strong enough, and then only can Gandhi's ideas can be implemented. It can be made relevant. The principle of non-violence is the best gift that Mahatma Gandhi has presented to the world. Peace and non-violence are the most necessary things at present time. The bigger countries are trying to, bigger in the sense that powerful countries are trying to swallow up the smaller nations. And there is anarchy and terrorism. And the noble idea of non-violence, Gandhi's idea of non-violence, of peace, can save the world in the most difficult period of India, most difficult period of the world. There have been so many experiments. Things about that entire life is an experiment. It is experiment with truth. So he has never said that my views are final. He has never said that there can be no change in my views. He said, he wrote in Harijan, that if I have different views on the same topic, then if in my sanity, they will try to choose the later view. Because he says that I am growing from truth, going from one to another truth. So he was never rigid in his method. He was never conservative in his outlook. That is why Gandhi has been often described that he is also a scientist, not only a philosopher, but also a scientist, because he's interested in making experiments with truth. Gandhi said that this is one reason why Gandhi can be relevant even in the present time. Gandhi said that the only thing that we should be careful about is that we should conform to the twin principles of truth and ahimsa. Any principle that we accept, any idea that we support can be taken to be relevant only if it has, provided it has truth and non-violence at the background. This is the only necessity that Gandhi imposed on us. Otherwise, we are free to choose anything. We are free to views. We are free to choose our principles in the way we like, provided it has truth and non-violence as the background. So the entire philosophy or the ideas of Gandhi had spiritualism at the background. This was the noblest part. Has spiritualism at the background. I would not say religion, but it is spiritualism at the background. And spiritualism has molded all his activities. And the great psychoanalyst Jung, he said, referring to his patients, he said that when I examine the patients, I find that more than half of my patients fell ill because they had lost their spiritual aim, they had lost their spiritual outlook. And they were not cured unless and until their spiritual outlook was regained. So, and I can refer to many such examples, by scientists, given by scientists. And everybody must have read that book, Future Shock by Alvin Toffler. By Alvin Toffler, where he states that the devastation of the society is due to the overemphasis on machinery, overemphasis on industrialization, overemphasis on mechanization, and so on. And things will not be set right until and unless that spiritual outlook, the spiritual aim has been regained. That is the view of Alvin Toffler also. So, if India has to prosper, if the problems of our society, not only India, if the problems of the society must be solved, then Gandhi is the answer. I feel Mahatma Gandhi can be the answer, one very good answer, provided there are some modifications to suit the conditions of the present. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Truth is indeed the base of all philosophy. So correct. And thinking about religion specifically, since it is the most volatile topic in today's world, and in a country like ours, with an array of diverse religious beliefs, Gandhi could be the best illustration. Who was primarily a man of religion, and a religion that, as you have said, as all of us know, was based on truth, love, and non-violence. And uh, just like him, even all of us are, I'm sure, greatly perturbed by the fighting among the people in the name of religion. And in fact, he laid his life for the sake of religious unity. So I think let's all be true and non-violent in our thoughts, words, and action, as he wanted the whole world to be. And that would be, I think, the best way to pay homage to him. So thank you so much, ma'am. It was indeed very enlightening and delightful to listen to you. Uh,
So much.
so, ma'am, I was just wondering when you were speaking, like the need of the hour is, kind of to moralize politics. If I may talk about politics. So politics in every form, I'm not just talking about the one in the field that we every day come across. So I think moralizing politics is so important. And I've read that Gandhi's prophetic emphasis was rather, that there is no politics devoid of religion. So, ma'am, can we maybe deliberate on like what measures can be taken to see to it that these get effectively rooted in modern mind?
Please, I can't hear you properly. Probably there's some defect in the. Yeah, please repeat the last a little louder.
Okay, ma'am. I mean, since he emphasized on the fact that there could be no politics devoid of religion. So, and so in modern time, in today's world, I mean, moralizing politics is so important. And if, as he said, religion is the best way to moralize politics, the secular religion that he talked about, what steps could be taken, perhaps? I mean, immediate steps, maybe, as a part of government machinery, maybe, or academicians.
Yeah. Actually, people have forgotten. The people who are responsible. I mean, who are forming the government. Those who form the government is our leaders. They have taken the promise. They are in politics and they have taken the promise of serving the people. So they have so many promises, but the promises are hardly met. That is, they are going against truth. They are going against truth because they make, before the election, they make promises that this will be given, that will be given, we'll be doing this, we'll be doing that. After is, they forget all their principles, they forget all their promises. It's a breach of their promise. And if people, it is very difficult to moralize people, it is true. Morality is something which is in our heart, which is the ideals which are imbibed in us by our teachers, by our background, by the society. In the mad race for power, in the mad race for money, and so on, we forget these ideas. We forget these ideas, and we have to make an effort. If the leaders do not keep promises, the people, that is the subject, the ruled, the people who are being ruled, they must have the courage to go against the government, to raise their voice against the leaders, to raise their voice against the politicians, and try to bring them in the right path. Actually, in a democratic society, if there is true democracy, the power lies in the hands of the people. The true power must lie, I'm saying, I don't say lies, must lie in the hands of the people. And every person should be aware of his right, that this is my right, this is my freedom, this right I have got, and I must try my best to enforce my right. Because people people must be fearless. Most of the people, so fast, we are so scared of something against the government, lest I am put on the bar, and so on and so forth. But if all the people are fearless, if they raise their voice against the government, if they raise their voice against the leaders, then I think to some extent the politics of our country can be moralized. Purity can be brought about. That is my view. And people should be aware about their rights. People must understand and they must exercise. There is no end to corruption. There is no end to all the corrupt means that are indulged in by the police.
Definitely, ma'am. We just cannot sit at home and wonder and wish the world to change. We must become aware and conscious of our role in the society.
Not only aware, yes. Not only aware, but exercise their rights.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
By raising their voices, at least we can we can shout at least.
Yes, ma'am.
Or even if we cannot do anything. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so
Ma'am,
much for your question.
We have a question, ma'am. We have a question from a student of ours. He asks, how would you put in today's world? How would you put Gandhian approach towards development? Gandhian approach towards development in today's world.
In today's world, you see, development is a multifaceted word. Development means development, all-round development. So development in every aspect of human life. So, as I have already mentioned, that Gandhi, what he said as Krishna, he said is as old as the hills. What Gandhi says is nothing new. What I say is as old as the hills. Only I try to put them into everyday practice. This is Gandhi's view. Now, he has given us his view on all the different aspects. Because I forgot to mention education. Education also, Gandhi had something to say, because he said that in the educational field there should be free and compulsory education up to the age of 18 years. Then there must be emphasis must be given in the mother tongue, because compulsory education can be given in one's own mother tongue. These are some of the views which are being practiced today. So I think if Gandhi's ideas or his ideals can be put into practice, unemployment. Now, instead of searching for white-collar jobs in the offices, or becoming a teacher or a lecturer or an assistant professor in a college, or being a teacher in a school, if I try, that is the vocational part, if I try to do something on my own by using the minimum of capital, that is very much lacking. That is very much lacking in Assam. I've come to Assam now. Yes. Abroad it is there, the dignity of labor, what we call it. The dignity of labor is very much there in the Western countries. But in India and in our state, people are ashamed to do some certain work. They feel ashamed, the students feel ashamed to do some certain kind of work. And I think that they should give up this inhibition. They should give up this inhibition and try to do whatever is possible. For example, in the other day, a person came to my house and he said that he has taken up a new job of cleaning the pipe. Such many avenues are there. Gandhi also talked about it. Many avenues are there in the rural sector, in the various sectors. Coming to the social field, they must try to do certain work which enrich the society. It's like Vivekananda said that the student's power is the best power. There's the greatest power on earth, the student. So even I feel that all the strength lie in the hands of the students. We are decaying. We people are becoming old. We do not have much strength or do not have so much of willpower. But the present upcoming generation, the generations that are coming up, the students, they have all the depth, they have the zeal, they have the strength, the dreams, and they should try to fulfill their dreams in their own way. It may not be securing a very well-paid job or something in an office, in the corporate world or other fields, but at least they can do something by having their self-respect and thus grow. Not only it becomes static, but grow from time to time and become the best man in that particular field.
Right.
And this is what Gandhi dreamt about, his concept of Ram Rajya. Gandhi has a concept of Ram Rajya, the beautiful,
Yes, ma'am.
or the state.
A utopian state, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So that is not something which cannot be fulfilled. Though it is utopia, it can be realizable. I feel that it can be realized.
Absolutely. And I think, ma'am, your generation, ma'am, instead of maybe looking at it as somebody who's a generation which is passe or which is decaying, I think your generation provides the source of inspiration for the younger generation who can materialize.
Thank you so much.
So,
Thank you so much.
yes, ma'am. And I think the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat, if implemented properly, could perhaps materialize the utopian world that Gandhi dreamt of, maybe.
Yeah, really, very true.
Ma'am, we have two more questions. I think we can take two more questions. Yeah. So this question, there was another question which is again on development, Gandhi and development. I think you have answered that as well. The same question, from another student, but two more questions. One is from a colleague of mine, Dhiraj Borkotuki. He asks, Madam, do you think that the younger generation is losing touch with the Gandhian values?
The younger generation is?
Is the younger generation losing touch with the Gandhian values?
Yes.
Yes.
To some extent,
Yes.
you are right. They are losing touch with the Gandhian ideals. Because, you see, in my parents' time, my father was a Gandhian. So in that time, they were very much, Gandhian ideals were very much vibrant. They saw Gandhi, they saw Gandhi, people who sat near Gandhi, they were influenced by Gandhi because he was living at that time, once upon a time. But we have not seen Gandhi, but still that, the ideas of Gandhi or the principles of Gandhi influenced us a lot. But the present generation, I would not be surprised if some students have not heard or will not hear. I think our grandchildren will know very less about Mahatma Gandhi. As time goes, people are forgotten. Gandhi will not be forgotten. There is no chance of Gandhi being forgotten, but that diminishes. The force that is there, that was there, diminishes to some extent. It becomes dim. It becomes dimmer and dimmer. So, but far as practicable, to the means of these lectures that you have organized, I'm so thankful to you. And these lectures, the seminars, and other things that we can.
Yes.
We can talk about him, we can listen to the people so that our students get a chance of being acquainted with.
Yes, ma'am. Definitely. Ma'am, just a last question that we would take up. This is from Kaustav
Yeah.
Padmapati. He is a colleague again, and he's from the Department of Political Science and Public Administration. He asks,
Yeah.
with the rise of communal views and Islamophobia among the new generation of Indians, do you think Gandhi's concept of secularism is still relevant? How do you address the feeling of insecurity among the minority community?
Okay. A very relevant question. A very relevant question. There should not be any discrimination between one religion and the other religion. And Gandhi again and again reminded the people of Hindu-Muslim unity. And he was so sad to see the communal riots in all the Muslims. He began fasting. Because Gandhi himself said that he read the Quran. He read the whole of the Quran. And he said that there is nothing in the Quran which goes against unity. The concept of jihad is there, no doubt. People would refer to the concept of jihad, that is killing people belonging to other religions, other than Islam. People, I have not read the Quran in full, but what I could gather is that jihad actually means a war against the non-believers of God, non-believers in God. It does not mean killing of the non-believers of Islam. Though in some places there are references that people can be killed if they do not believe. So that is very vague. But Islamic, by the word Islam, we mean peace or entering into peace. Aslama, Islam comes from the word aslama, which means entering into peace or submission to the will of God. So if they are the peace lovers, a true Muslim cannot go against his religion. Just as a true Hindu cannot go against his own religion, which is so broad, which is so tolerant. Hinduism is such a tolerant religion, which is such a, see the word dharma. The word dharma in Hinduism does not mean religion. It means way of life. A sustaining force of the society. If dharma means the sustaining force of the society, how can the society be divided? How can we be intolerant of other religions? There is no scope at all. And that is why a true Hindu cannot go against any religion, any other religion, so to say. So he will be tolerant towards Islam, he will be tolerant towards a Christian, to a Buddhist, to a Jain. If we truly, I feel, if we truly follow the principles of Hinduism, if we truly follow the principles of religion in the true sense of the term, we cannot be intolerant. We cannot be intolerant towards other religions. And so,
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. I mean, that was the last question, but one student, I think, just asked. I think that is very easy to like. Uh, practice in life. She asks, Gandhi says, be the change you wish to see in the world. How can we be that change? So I think it is all about practicing what you preach and what you believe in. And it's about anything in life, all the virtues in life. Whatever you come across, whatever you are told or taught in school or in your family, practice that. And I think that way you become the change that you want to see in the world. Yeah. So thank you so much, ma'am, for your for sharing your precious time and thoughts with us. I'm sure everyone in the webinar today must have been highly informed and influenced by your deliberation. I myself, I'm very much, in fact, influenced. And we all know Gandhiji. We all know so much about his life. But yes, in the busyness of life, we tend to forget him sometimes. But we should not just on a particular day, but always remember him, and we'll try to do it definitely from today onwards. Thank you so much once again, ma'am. We'd love to meet you more. We'd love to hear you more.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure to be here with you all.
Thank you, ma'am. I thank our dynamic Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. S.P. Singh, to have mentored and occasioned this webinar series, and also for being a regular guiding spirit behind all our endeavors. Thank you, sir, so much for your time. I would also thank Chairperson Academics, even though he could not join, but he's been a constant support as well. I thank sir. I thank our Registrar, Madam Angira Mimani, for her timely advice and cooperation. I also take this opportunity to thank Professor Krishna Borwa and Professor Pradeep Jyoti Mohanto. Sir has been with us throughout uh, for being a constant source of support and inspiration every time that we organize something. Thank you so much, ma'am, sir. I thank the entire organizing team of Royal School of Languages and Royal School of Humanities and Social Sciences for their tireless effort in making this webinar series a success. And lastly, I thank the management, the technical team of RGU for all their support. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Jai Hind. Thank you, ma'am.
ডাক্তৰটা জামৰিলা ভাত খাই ভাত খাই বাঢ়িব আৰু লাহে লাহে মুনু বাবু আহিলে নেকি আহিলে নৱনীতা
আজি মই খুৱাই যে খাব কিন্তু দেই মই ইমান দেখুৱাইছো এইবিলাক তুমি ইয়াত চাই চাই পেলাই খাই দিবা বুজিছানে Five like.